Good evening. I'm Riley Bresnahan. I'm one of the storytellers selected to bring you at home on a journey with us, the Porter Players, as we present The Wizards of Oz. I welcome you on behalf of my co-student director, Emma Forbes, and our faculty directors, Dr. Gilbert and Miss Musich. Before we step aside so that you can enjoy the songs and dances from The Wizard of Oz, The Wiz, and Wicked, Aiden, Jersey, Brooke, Amelia, Sam, Bella, and I would like to pay homage to the 120-year-old children's book series that has inspired countless actors, musicians, technicians, and of course, student artists. Starting his work as an author at the age of 40, L. Frank Baum wrote 14 books chronicling Dorothy Gale's multiple trips to the merry old land of Oz. The books were written and published while Baum and his family lived in Chicago, Illinois. Prior to becoming the best-selling children's author in the country, Baum was struggling to make enough money to keep his family out of poverty. In fact, he moved them from New York to Chicago in the 1880s because he thought the barren Midwest of America was the land of opportunity. L. Frank Baum set out to create joyful, entertaining books for American school children, who at the time read only European literature. European fairy tales were frightening cautionary tales with obvious moral messages. And although Baum didn't make it through more than a few years at his East Coast boarding school and didn't graduate from school, he thought that by the turn of the 20th century, the American education system took care of teaching morality and citizenship, so books for children could simply be fun. Here's the introduction that Baum wrote for his first book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, published in 1900.
Folklore, legends, myths, and fairy tales have followed childhood throughout the ages. For every healthy youngster has a wholesome and instinctive love for stories marvelous, fantastic, and manifestly unreal. The winged fairies of Grimm and Andersen have brought more happiness to childish hearts than all other human creations. Yet the old-time fairy tale, having served for generations, may now be served as historical in the children's library. For now is the time for a newer series of wonder tales to be introduced, in which the stereotypes genie, dwarf, and fairy are eliminated, all with the horrible and blood-curdling incidents devised by their authors to point out a fearsome moral to each tale. Modern education includes morality. Therefore, the modern child seeks only entertainment in its wonder tales and gladly dispenses of all disagreeable incidents. Having this thought in mind, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was written solely to please the children of today. It aspires to being a modernized fairy tale, in which the heartaches and nightmares are left out, and the joy and wonderment are retained.
A sequel called The Marvelous Land of Oz was published when Baum received countless letters asking for more tales of the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow. The reason for the popularity of the book and these characters? Of course, they were charmingly fresh characters and families adored them, but truly, what made The Wizard of Oz a household name? Musical theater, of course. Historians from the Smithsonian to the Chicago Public Library, where original playbills and posters are curated, claim that it was the 1902 musical, The Wizard of Oz, book and lyrics by L. Frank Baum, music by Paul Tietjens, which premiered at the Grand Opera House in Chicago that skyrocketed the series to fame. Less than a year later, the musical opened on Broadway, where it wowed audiences with a tornado scene and a field of singing and dancing all-girls poppy chorus.
American musical theater at the time featured faraway exotic places, like the rivers of Vienna and the islands of the Caribbean. But this show took audiences from its humble start in Kansas to a completely fantastical place called Oz. The show and its sets glittered. The Tin Woodman and the Brainless Scarecrow were played by breakout stars David Montgomery and Fred Stone. The main character, a smart, powerful young girl, was played by an unknown Anne Laughlin. Many stage plays of the time featured human actors as animals, but the animals never spoke and the actors only pantomimed. So the Cowardly Lion was relegated to a bit part, and Dorothy's beloved Toto was redrafted as a cow named Imogene.
The musical ran on Broadway for 9 months and toured the nation for nearly 9 years. In 1911, the play was available for stock companies to produce around the country. It was a favorite of amateur theater groups for many years. But in 1939 came the MGM Technicolor Marvel, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, making Judy Garland forever Dorothy, the character who, like Little Red Riding Hood, was told to follow the path, but when she strayed, she was bravely fighting for her friends, her family, and her home. She was the champion of children everywhere.
In 1942, the St. Louis Municipal Opera produced a staged version of the 1939 film. This is the musical that is performed by theater troupes large and small to this day and stays faithful to the movie we all know and love. Our very own Porter Players Drama Club produced The Wizard of Oz in 2005.
In tonight's performance, you'll see 3 songs from this now classic musical. A trio of vocalists will take you somewhere over the rainbow, a quartet of gentlemen will share their optimistic voices, and our soloist, Aidan Callahan, will teach us about courage if he were king of the forest.
All the vocalists tonight are under the direction of Mr. Chad Getz, with student assistants Aidan Callahan and Nora Gillogly.
Along with the selections from the 1942 Wizard of Oz, our Porter Player Wizards will sing and dance on Down the Road with 3 selections from the Broadway musical entitled The Wiz, the Super Soul musical Wonderful Wizard of Oz. This adaptation of the 1900 novel and its character moved their home from a farm in Kansas to the big streets of New York City. The Wiz also has a famous film component. The 1978 movie featured Diana Ross's amazing vocals and Michael Jackson's memorable dances. But this time, the stage version actually came first. The 1975 Broadway production won 7 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. The next adaptation to make its mark on Broadway was the 2003 Wicked. The telling of this tale from the perspectives of the Good Witch, Glinda, and the Wicked Witch, Elphaba, is based on the 1995 novel Wicked by Gregory Maguire. The plot mentions Dorothy Gale, but focuses on the now famous frenemies as they vie for popularity and compete for notoriety, but also acknowledges the impact that one another has had on their lives and souls. Tonight from The Wiz, you'll see 2 musical numbers choreographed by Miss Jenny Donahue-Smith. Ease on Down the Road, Dance Captain Ronan Bales, and Brand New Day, Dance Captain Madeline Sanford. Miss Chrissy Carlson choreographed No Bad News, along with Dance Captain Paige Swoboda. These numbers will be performed on the East Campus stage in front of the sets designed by Mr. Ken Frickholm and built by our scene tech crew, led by Liliana Gonzalez and Zach Lazinski. Throughout the production, you'll see 2 of the catchiest and cleverest songs from Wicked. A duet, What Is This Feeling?, featuring roommates with more or less a sibling rivalry, and a solo Glinda celebrating the joy of her own celebrity, but also admitting to the difficulties of responsibility in the song Popular. Finally, closing the night, the seniors will leave us with a beautiful and meaningful Changed for Good.
And throughout the night, our storytellers will return to dramatize their favorite moments from the book series that started it all.
Thanks for watching tonight's performance. We hope to remind you of childhood memories of when you first met Dorothy and her friends, and maybe inspire you to seek out another adaptation to watch, sing, or read for the first time.
Let's begin with the most recognizable song in tonight's show. Over the Rainbow won an Academy Award for Best Original Song in 1939 and has been sung by artists around the world countless times ever since. This ballad has been used by parents everywhere to put their babies to sleep, and even used by NASA to wake astronauts while they truly fly high above the clouds. Here is Over the Rainbow.
When all the clouds darken up the skyway, there's a rainbow highway to be found, leading from your window pane, just a step behind the troubles melt like lemon drops,
In the country of the Gillikins, which is at the north of the land of Oz, lived a youth called Tip, for there was more to his name than that, for old Mombi often declared that his full name was Tippertarius, but no one was expected to say such a long word when Tip would do just as well.
This boy remembered nothing of his parents, for he had been brought when quite young to be reared by the old woman known as Mombi, whose reputation, I am sorry to say, was none of the best. For the Gillikin people had reason to suspect her of indulging in magical arts, and therefore hesitated to associate with her. Mombi was not exactly a witch, because the good witch who ruled that part of the land of Oz had forbidden any other witch to exist in her dominion. So Tip's guardian, however much she might aspire to working magic, realized it was unlawful to be more than a sorceress, or at most a wizardess.
Tip was made to carry wood from the forest, that the old woman might boil in her pot. He also worked in the cornfields, hoeing and husking, and he fed the pigs and milked the four-horned cow that was Mombi's especial pride. But you must not suppose he worked all the time, for he felt that that would be bad for him. When sent to the forest, Tip often climbed trees for bird eggs, or amused himself by chasing the fleet white rabbits, or fishing in the brooks with bent pins. Then he would hastily gather his armful of wood and carry it home. And when he was supposed to be working in the cornfields, and the tall stalks hid him from Mombi's view, Tip would often dig in the gopher holes, or if the mood seized him, lie upon his back between the rows of corn and take a nap. So, by taking care not to exhaust his strength, he grew as strong and as rugged as a boy may be.
But Tip frankly hated her, and took no pains to hide his feelings.
Indeed, he sometimes showed less respect for the old woman than he should have done, considering that she was his guardian.
There were pumpkins in Mombi's cornfield, lying golden red among the rows of green stalks, and these had been planted and carefully tended to, so that the four-horned cow might eat of them in the winter-time.
But one day, after all the corn had been cut and stacked, and Tip was carrying the pumpkins to the stable, he took a notion to make a jack-lantern to try to give the old woman a fright with it.
So he selected a fine big pumpkin, one with a lustrous orange-red color, and began carving it. With the point of his knife, he made 2 round eyes, a 3-cornered nose, and a mouth in the shape of a new moon. The face, when completed, could not have been considered strictly beautiful, but it wore a smile so big and broad and was so jolly in expression
That even Tip laughed as he looked admiringly at his work. The child had no playmates, so he did not know that boys often take out the inside of a pumpkin jack, and in this space thus put a lighted candle to render the face more startling. But he conceived an idea of his own that promised to be quite as effective. He decided to manufacture the form of a man who would wear this pumpkin head, and to stand it in a place where old Mombi would meet it face to face. And then, said Tip to himself with a laugh, she'll squeal louder than the brown pig does when I pull her tail, and shiver with fright worse than I did last year when I had the ague. He had plenty of time to accomplish this task, for Mombi had gone to a village.
To buy groceries, she said, and it was a journey of at least 2 days.
So he took his axe to the forest, and selected some stout, straight saplings, for which he cut down and trimmed all their twigs and leaves. From these he would make the arms, legs, and the feet of this man. For the body, he stripped a sheet of thick bark from around a big tree, and with much labor, fashioned it into a cylinder of about the right size, pinning the edges together with wooden pegs. Then, whistling happily as he worked, he carefully jointed the limbs and fastened them to the body with pegs whittled into the shape of his knife. Tip was so delighted that he danced up and down and laughed aloud in boyish ecstasy. I must give him a name, he cried. So good a man as this must surely have a name. I believe, he added, after a moment's thought, I will name this fellow Jack Pumpkinhead.
After considering the matter carefully, Tip decided that the best place to locate Jack would be at the bend in the road, a little way from the house. When the man was set up facing the turn in the path where old Mombi was to appear, he looked natural enough to be a fair imitation of a Gillikin farmer, and unnatural enough to startle anyone that came on him unawares.
As it was too early in the day to expect the old woman to return home, Tip went down into the valley below the farmhouse and began to gather nuts from the trees that grew there.
However, old Mombi returned earlier than usual. She had met a crooked wizard who resided in a lonely cave in the mountains, and had traded with him several important secrets of magic. Having in this way secured 3 new recipes, 4 new powders, and a selection of herbs of wonderful power and potency, she hobbled home as fast as she could in order to test her new sorceries. So intent was Mombi on the treasures she had obtained, that when she came to the bend in the road and caught a glimpse of the man, she merely nodded and said, "Good evening, sir."
But a moment after, noting that the person did not move or reply, she cast a shrewd glance into his face and discovered his pumpkin head elaborately carved by Tip's jackknife.
Ejaculated Mombi, giving a sort of grunt. "That rascally boy has been playing tricks again." "Very good, very good." Angrily, she raised her stick in the air to smash in the grinning pumpkin head of the dummy. But a sudden thought made her pause, the uplifted stick left motionless in the air. "Why, here is a good chance to test my new powder," she said eagerly, "and then I can tell whether that crooked wizard has fairly traded secrets, or whether he has fooled me as wickedly as I fooled him." So she set down her basket and began fumbling in it for one of the precious powders she had obtained. While Mombi was thus occupied,
Tip strolled back with his pockets full of nuts.
and discovered the old woman,
Standing beside his man,
and apparently not the least bit frightened by it.
At first, he was generally disappointed, but the next moment he began curious to know what Mombi was going to do next. So he hid behind a hedge, where he could see without being seen, and prepared to watch.
It's important for all people to see themselves represented in the stories we tell. That's why in 1974, a new version of The Wizard of Oz was written from the ground up. Composer Charlie Smalls and book writer William F. Brown wrote The Wiz as an all-black reimagining of the classic story. Today we know that there is room for performers from all backgrounds and that audiences will support them thanks to musicals like The Wiz paving the way. In fact, when asked what his favorite musical is, theater legend Stephen Sondheim always says without hesitation, The Wiz. Here's the most famous number from that musical, Ease On Down the Road.
Come on and ease on down the road. Come on, ease on down the road. Don't you carry nothing that might be a load. Come on, ease on down the road. Come on, ease on down the road. Come on, ease on down the road. Don't you carry nothing that might be a load. Come on, ease on down the road.
'Cause there may be times when you think you've lost your mind, and the steps you're taking leave you 3-4 steps behind. As you keep on keeping on the road that you choose, and don't give up walking 'cause you gave up shoes.
Come on and ease on down the road. Come on, ease on down the road. Don't you carry nothing that might be a load. Come on, ease on down, 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 ease on down the road.
Pick your right foot up when your left one's down. Come on, let's keep moving, don't you lose your ground. 'Cause the road you're walking might be hard sometimes, but just keep on stepping and you'll be just fine. Come on, ease on down the road. Ease on down the road. Ease on down the road.
Tip strolled back with his pockets full of nuts.
and discovered the old woman,
Standing beside his man,
and apparently not the least bit frightened by it.
At first, he was generally disappointed, but the next moment he began curious to know what Mombi was going to do next. So he hid behind a hedge where he could see without being seen and prepared to watch.
After some search, the woman drew from her basket an old pepper box, upon the faded label of which the wizard had written in lead pencil, "Powder of Life." "Ah, here it is," she cried joyfully, "and now let us see if it is potent."
Tip was much surprised when he overheard this speech.
Then he saw old Mombi raise her arm and sprinkle the powder from the box onto the pumpkin head of his man Jack. She did this in the same way one would pepper a baked potato.
and the powder sifted down from Jack's head and scattered over the red shirt and pink waistcoat and purple trousers Tip had dressed him in, and a portion even fell upon the patched and worn shoes.
Then, putting the pepper box back into the basket, Mombi lifted her left hand with its little finger pointed upward and said, "We-ah." Then she lifted her right hand with the thumb pointed upward and said, "Ti-ah." Then she lifted both hands with all the fingers and thumbs spread out and cried, "Pee-ah."
Jack Pumpkinhead stepped back a pace at this and said in a reproachful voice, "Don't yell like that. Do you think I'm deaf?"
Old Mombi danced around him, frantic with delight. "He lives!" she cried. "He lives! He lives!" Then she threw her stick into the air and caught it as it came down, and hugged herself with both arms, and tried to do the step of a jig, all the time repeating rapturously, "He lives! He lives! He lives!"
Now you may well suppose that Tip observed all of this with amazement. At first he was so frightened and so horrified that he wanted to run away, but his legs trembled and shook so badly that he couldn't. Then it struck him as a very funny thing for Jack to come to life, especially as the expression on his pumpkin face was so droll and comical, it excited laughter on the instant. So, recovering from his first fear, Tip began to laugh.
And the merry peals reached old Mombi's ears and made her hobble quickly toward the hedge, where she seized Tip's collar and dragged him back to where she had left her basket and the pumpkin-headed man. "You naughty, sneaking, wicked boy!" she exclaimed furiously.
I wasn't making fun of you, protested Tip. I was laughing at the old Pumpkinhead. Look at him. Isn't he a picture, though?
"I hope you are not reflecting on my personal appearance," said Jack, and it was so funny to hear his great voice, while his face continued to wear its jolly smile.
That Tip again burst into a peal of laughter. "But what are you going to do with him now that he is alive?" asked Tip, wondering.
"I must think it over," answered Mombi, "but we must get home at once, for it is growing dark. Help the Pumpkinhead to walk."
"Never mind me," said Jack. "I can walk as well as you can. Haven't I got legs and feet, and aren't they jointed?"
"Are they?" asked the woman, turning to Tip.
"Well, of course they are. I made them myself," returned the boy with pride.
So they started for the house, but when they reached the farmyard, old Mombi led the pumpkin man to the cow stable and shut him up in an empty stall, fastening the door securely on the outside. "I've got to attend to you first," she said, nodding her head to Tip.
"I'm hungry," said Tip in a sulky tone.
"You won't be hungry long," replied Mombi with a grim look.
According to the tale that is wicked, before Dorothy blew in from Kansas, Glinda, the good witch, and Alphaba, the wicked witch, got to know each other as college roommates. Though they'd eventually be friends, it was hate at first sight. Composer and lyricist Stephen Schwartz told the story of their first meeting through an ironic parody of love songs. Here is What Is This Feeling?
There's been some confusion over rooming here at Shiz. But of course I'll care for Nessa. But of course I'll rise above it. For I know that's how you want me to respond. Yes. There's been some confusion, for you see my roommate is unusually and exceedingly peculiar and altogether quite impossible to describe. Blonde. What is this feeling so sudden and new? I felt the moment I laid
laid eyes on you. My pulse is rushing,
My head is reeling.
my face is flushing. What is this feeling, fervent as a flame? Does it have a name? Yes. Loathing, unadulterated loathing for your face,
Your voice.
your clothing. Let's just say I loathe it all. Every little trait, however small, makes my very flesh begin to crawl. With simple utter loathing, there's a strange exhilaration in such total detestation. It's so pure and so strong. Though I do admit it came on fast, still I do believe that it can last. And I will be loathing, loathing you my whole life long.
Dear Glinda, you are just too good. How do you stand it? I don't think I could. She's a terror, she's a tartar. We don't mean to show a bias, but Glinda, you are one.
These things are sent to dry us.
Poor Glinda forced to reside with someone so disgusted. We want to tell you we're on your side. We share.
What is this feeling so sudden and new? I felt the moment I laid eyes on you. My pulse is rushing, my head is reeling. I loathe it all. What is this feeling? However small, does it have a name? Yes. Loathing, there's a strange exhilaration in such total detestation. It's so pure and so strong. Though I do admit it came on fast, still I do believe that it can last. And I will be loathing for forever, loathing truly, deeply, loathing you my whole life long. Boo!
So they started for the house, but when they reached the farmyard, old Mombi led the pumpkin man to the cow stable and shut him up in an empty stall, fastening the door securely on the outside. I've got to attend to you first, she said, nodding her head to Tip.
I'm hungry, said Tip in a sulky tone.
You won't be hungry long, replied Mombi with a grim look.
The boy didn't like this speech, for it sounded like a threat.
The woman hung above the fire a small black kettle. Then she measured out equal parts milk and vinegar and began adding them into the kettle. Next, she produced several packets of herbs and powders from her basket and began adding a portion of each to the contents of the kettle. Occasionally, she would draw near the candle and read from a yellow paper the recipe of the mess she was concocting.
As Tip watched her, his uneasiness increased. What's that for? He asked.
For you, returned Mombi briefly.
Tip spoke again. Have I got to drink that stuff? He asked, nodding toward the pot.
Yes, said Mombi.
What'll it do to me? Asked Tip.
If it's properly made, replied Mombi, it will change or transform you into a marble statue.
What use will I be then? Asked Tip. There won't be anyone to work for you.
I'll make the pumpkin head work for me, said Mombi.
He sat still and shivered and looked anxiously at the kettle. Perhaps it won't work, he muttered, in a voice that sounded weak and discouraged.
Oh, I think it will, answered Mombi cheerfully. I seldom make a mistake. You cannot drink it until it has become quite cold, announced the old witch, for in spite of the law, she had acknowledged practicing witchcraft. We must both go to bed now, and at daybreak I will call you, and at once complete your transformation into a marble statue. With this, she hobbled into her room, bearing the steaming kettle with her, and Tip heard her close and lock the door. The boy did not go to bed, as he had been commanded to do so, but still sat glaring at the embers of the dying fire.
Tip reflected. It's a hard thing to be a marble statue, he thought. I'll run away. That's what I'll do. And I may as well go before she makes me drink that nasty stuff in the kettle.
He waited until the snores of the old witch announced she was fast asleep.
And then he arose softly and cautiously left the house and latched the door behind him. Both moon and stars shone brightly, and the night seemed peaceful and inviting from the close and ill-smelling kitchen. "I'll be glad to get away," said Tip, softly, "for I never did like that old woman." He was walking slowly toward the road when a thought made him pause. "I don't like to leave Jack Pumpkinhead to the tender mercies of old Mombi, for I made him, even if the old witch did bring him to life." He then retraced his steps to the cow stable and opened the door of the stall where the pumpkin-headed man had been left. Jack was standing in the middle of the stall, and by the moonlight he could see that he was smiling just as jovially as ever. "Come on," said the boy, beckoning.
Where to? Asked Jack.
"You'll know as soon as I do," answering Tip, smiling sympathetically into the pumpkin man's face. "Let us go where adventure takes us."
And when Mombi woke in the morning, they were both gone.
One of the most beloved characters in children's literature is the Cowardly Lion. Kids can always relate to his fear and can laugh at his antics. From the first stage production of The Wizard of Oz, it was always a part for a broad, comic actor who loved to steal the show. In the 1939 movie, this part went to Bert Lahr, the legendary vaudeville comedian who wasn't afraid to ham it up. When he was warned that Hollywood had a habit of typecasting actors, he replied, "Yeah, but how many parts are there for lions?" Here is If I Were King of the Forest.
If I were king of the forest, not queen, not duke, not prince, my regal robes of the forest would be satin, not cotton, not chins. I'd command each thing, be it fish or fowl, with a woof and a woof and a royal growl. And I'd skip my heels, and the trees would kneel, and the mountains bow, and the bulls kowtow. And the sparrow would take wing. Fee, fi, were king. Each rabbit would show respect to me. The chipmunks genuflect to me. Though my tail would lash, I would show compassion for every underling. Fee, if I were king, just king. I'd be monarch of all I survey. I'd be monarch of all I survey. Monarch of all I survey. With courage is the thing of things. With courage I'd be king of kings. The whole year round I'd be hailed and crowned by every living thing. Fee, if I were king.
Dorothy Gale was a little Kansas girl who had come to live in the land of Oz and had been given a delightful suite of rooms in Ozma's royal palace, just because Ozma loved Dorothy and wanted to live as near her as possible so that the two could always be close. One morning, Dorothy
And her pup, Toto.
were discussing the always perfect weather in Oz and thought that they should make a journey to the Munchkin country, which was one of the 4 great countries in the land of Oz, ruled by Ozma. It was perhaps the prettiest of all land, and the two had not been back to visit for some time.
Let's ask Ozma if she'd like to go too, barked the always thoughtful Toto.
All right, said Dorothy. I'll go ask Ozma. Perhaps she'll let us take the sawhorse and the red wagon, which would be much nicer for us than having to walk all the way. This land of Oz is a pretty big place when you get to all the edges of it. Dorothy opened the door to the outer chamber. She went into the sleeping room of the fairy ruler of Oz. The bed of ivory and gold was vacant. The room was vacant. Not a trace of Ozma was to be seen. She went into the music room, the library, the laboratory, the bath, the wardrobe, and even into the great throne room, which adjoined the royal suite. But in none of these places could she find Ozma. Never before had Ozma gone away without telling her friends where she was going.
Why not look in the magic picture, suggested Toto. That will tell us where she is in just 1 second.
Of course, cried Dorothy. Why didn't I think of that before? This wonderful magic picture was one of Royal Ozma's greatest treasures. There was a large gold frame, in the center of which was a bluish-gray canvas, on which various scenes constantly appeared and disappeared. If one who stood there wished to see what any person anywhere in the world was doing, all they had to do was only necessary to make the wish, and then the scene in the picture would switch to the scene where that person was, and show where he or she was then engaged in doing. So Dorothy and Toto knew it would be easy for them to wish to see Ozma, and from the picture they could quickly learn where she was. Dorothy advanced to the place where the picture was, usually protected by thick satin curtains, and pulled the draperies aside. Then she stared in amazement. The magic picture was gone! Only a blank space on the wall behind the curtain showed where it had formerly hung.
With that, Ozma rushed in from her balcony. Oh, Dorothy, said Ozma, I was looking for you.
I was looking for you.
My picture is gone.
How could this be? Mind Toto for me.
Of course.
I will search all of Oz.
You must ask Glinda the Good for help.
L. Frank Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz in 1900 at the turn of the century. It was a time of experimentation, innovation, and optimism. And let's not forget that this was the era of barbershop quartets. This musical style epitomized the unity, harmony, and all-around snazziness of the era of L. Frank Baum's beloved characters. Here is optimistic voices from the classical movie musical in the own turn-of-the-century style.
You're out of the woods, you're out of the dark, you're out of the night. Step into the sun, step into the light. Keep straight ahead for the most glorious place on the face of the earth or the sky, the sky. Hold on to your breath, hold on to your heart, hold on to your hope. March up to that gate and bid it open, open, bid it open. Do 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 Hold on to your breath, hold on to your heart, hold on to your hope. March up to that gate and bid it open, open, bid it open wide. Hold on to your hope, hold on to your heart and fly.
Meanwhile, on the hill outside Glinda the Good's purple palace in the Gilligan country in the northern quadrant of Oz, her sweet companion, Scraps, was admiring purple hills and flowers and watching her home anew. She was commonly called the Patchwork Girl because her body and arms were made from a gray patchwork quilt which had been cut into shape and stuffed with cotton. Her head was a round ball, fastened in the same manner and fastened to her shoulder. For hair, she had a mass of brown yarn, and to make a nose for her, a part of the cloth had been pulled out into the shape of a knob and tied with a string to hold it in place. Her mouth had been carefully cut, made by a slit in the proper place, and lining it with red silk. She left 2 rows of pearls for teeth and a bit of red flannel for tongue. In spite of this queer makeup, the Patchwork Girl was magically alive and proved herself not the least jolly and agreeable of the many quaint characters who inhabit the astonishing fairyland of Oz. Indeed, Scraps was a general favorite and Glinda's perfect companion.
While Scraps sat outside, Glinda was in her chambers making a flying potion for the Scarecrow's sawhorse.
Dorothy Gale burst in, realized she burst in, paused and bowed, then burst forward again. Dear Glinda the Good, Ozma's gone, and when I tried to find her on her magic picture, it was gone too.
When the Patchwork Girl heard that, she burst in, she realized she burst in, paused and bowed, and then burst forward again.
Scraps, said Glinda, fetch my great book of records, for I'm sure that's why Dorothy has come.
Of all the magical things which surrounded Glinda in her castle, there was none more marvelous than her great book of records. On the pages of this record book were constantly being inscribed day by day and hour by hour all of the important events that happened anywhere in the known world, and they were inscribed in the book at exactly the moment the events happened. This book's magic ability to take notes without a pen or a writer was the envy of school children everywhere. This wonderful book was placed upon a big gold table that stood in the middle of Glinda's drawing room. Except when Scraps went to fetch it, it wasn't there.
Glinda was stunned. She had just been reading the book of records last night. Remaining calm, she asked her companion, Scraps, did you see anyone near the great book of records yesterday?
No, said the sweet Patchwork Girl. I was playing in the woods yesterday with Dorothy and riding the sawhorse and had such a lovely time. My cotton stuffing was coming undone, and my shoe button eyes were dull and loose. I went to Dorothy's Auntie Em. She took such care of me. She stitched and patched and gave me these new shiny button eyes. I see wonderfully this morning. But last night, while she worked, I had no eyes at all. And with that, the little rag girl nearly shed so many tears would make her new stuffing soggy.
There, soothed Glinda the Good. It's not your fault. Try your new eyes.
This is unheard of. First Ozma's magic picture is missing, and then Glinda's book of records?
You must ask the wizard for help.
Who doesn't love a good villain? They provide conflict to the main characters, and they bring laughs to the audience. While the Wizard of Oz's Wicked Witch of the West often scares a lot of younger kids, adults can enjoy the character's campy performance. In The Wiz, the witch, now known as Eveline, gets to be threatening but never scary, and she doesn't like when anybody brings her information that she doesn't like. Here is Don't Nobody Bring Me No Bad News.
When I wake up in the morning, which it pleases me to do, don't nobody bring me no bad news. Cause I wake up already negative and I've wired up my fuse. So don't nobody bring me no bad news. Well, if we're gonna be buddies, better bone up on the rule. Cause don't nobody bring me no bad news. No bad news. You can be my best of friends as opposed to paying dues. Cause don't nobody bring me no bad news. 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 Don't nobody bring me no bad news. Cause I'll make you an offer, child, that you cannot refuse. Cause don't nobody bring me no bad news. When you're talking to me, don't be crying the blues. Cause don't nobody bring me no bad news. You can verbalize and vocalize, but just bring me the dues. Cause don't nobody bring me no bad news. Bring a message in your head or in something you can't lose. Cause don't nobody bring me no bad news. If you're gonna bring me something I can use. Cause don't nobody bring me no bad news. No bad news. No bad news. No bad news.
In the nearby land of the Winkies lived a petite Yip who was a favorite of all the Yips, and the Winkies, and the Frogman, and the Lavender Bear. It was Cake the Cookie Cook. She made pastries and sweets and treats in her little kitchen in her wicker house. Her house was humble, but she had one gift that was lovingly made by the Tin Woodman who ruled the Winkies. It was a cooking pan. Just a cooking pan? Oh no, this round pan is made of beaten gold. Around the top edge was a row of small diamonds. Around the center of the pan was a row of larger diamonds. And at the bottom was a row of exceedingly large and brilliant diamonds. In fact, they all sparkled magnificently. And the pan was so big and broad that it took a lot of diamonds to go around it 3 times. The Yips mined the diamonds and made it for their favorite cook, Cake. This pan was used for the most special of specialties. Cake's cookies. What does this have to do with the story of the missing picture in the book?
The wizard.
The wizard visited Cake the Cookie Cook every day to taste the cookies fresh off the diamond pan.
Dorothy and Scraps the patchwork girl
Knew to visit Cake to find the wizard.
But when the girls entered the wicker cottage, Cake was on the floor and the wizard was looking up and down the kitchen, from the fireplace to the stove and back to the fireplace and back to the stove.
Why, what's the matter? Asked Dorothy.
My pan is missing, choked Cake between sobs. Somebody took it!
There is none so wicked in all of Oz.
Well, Ozma's magic picture is missing, offered Dorothy. And Glinda's book of records is missing, admitted Scraps.
A thief? Preposterous!
I'm going to search throughout the land of Oz. I'm going with her, announced Scraps.
Wiping her eyes, Cake declared, I'm going too.
If there is a thief, maybe it's hiding in the land that's not traveled on the other side of the merry-go-round mountains. Be careful. You must find whomever is responsible.
Believe it or not, when the musical Wicked had its out-of-town tryout, it was a total underdog. Naysayers heard that there was a new musical about how Glinda and the Wicked Witch of the West were college best friends and thought the show didn't stand a chance. That was until they saw it. Audiences were moved by the story of friendship and discovering one's potential in the face of adversity. Even though it didn't win the coveted Tony Award for Best Musical that year, Wicked is still running 18 years later, making it one of the longest-running Broadway musicals of all time. Needless to say, it is rather popular.
Whenever I see someone less fortunate than I, and let's face it, who isn't less fortunate than I, my tender heart tends to start to bleed. And when someone needs a makeover, I simply have to take over. I know exactly what they need. And even in your case, though it's the toughest case I've yet to face, don't worry, I'm determined to succeed. Follow my lead, and yes, indeed, you will be popular. You're gonna be popular. I'll teach you the proper ploys when you talk to boys, little ways to flirt and flounce. I'll show you what shoes to wear, how to fix your hair, everything that really counts to be popular. I'll help you be popular. You'll hang with the right cohorts, you'll be good at sports, know the slang you've got to know. So let's start, 'cause you've got an awfully long way to go. Don't be offended by my frank analysis, think of it as personality dialysis. Now that I've chosen to become a pal, a sister and advisor, there's nobody wiser, not when it comes to popular. I know about popular, and with an assist from me to be who you'll be, instead of Jerry who you were, well, are. There's nothing that can stop you from becoming popular. Lar. La, 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 la. We're gonna make you popular. please. It's all about popular. It's not about aptitude. It's the way you're viewed, so it's very sure to be very, very popular, like me. And though you protest your disinterest, I know clandestinely you're gonna grin and bear it till you found popularity. La, 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 you'll be popular, just not quite as popular as me.
As the trio approached the mountain,
Dorothy wondered out loud, why are these peaks called the Merry-Go-Round Mountains?
I don't know, responded Scraps. But we must climb, over! And with that, the Patchwork Girl did not go up and over, but was caught in a spinning wind that brought her high and low, but mostly around the Merry-Go-Round Mountain. After 3 frightening, but thrilling and joyous spins, she gently landed on the other side.
Just out of the view of the other two.
but in the distance they could hear an echo.
Of a giggle.
We must go.
So Dorothy and Cake took turns on the ride of all rides and spun until the two landed on the other side of the land that is not traveled.
Here, the cottages are spread out. The land is vast and the town is quiet. Too quiet. In the littlest blue cottage lived Ugu, the boy shoemaker. He was a fine shoemaker, but his father was a retired magician and he wanted to be just like him. It isn't steady work, his father always said, so he learned to be a shoemaker. But before the trio of girls knocked on his door, they peered in the window.
They spotted the picture
and the book
and the pan. Come out!
Come out!
Ugu opened the door. Oh my, I can explain, began Ugu. I want to be a magician. So I rode the merry-go-round mountains and went to find the wizard. I saw the pan all alone and just wanted the tiniest taste of cookie dough. I leaned in for a lick and fell in the great pan. When I tried to climb out, I held the handle and it flew. Like a magic carpet, it took me. I wanted to see Osma's picture and read the book of records, but I needed more time to study. So I just put them in the pan and brought them here to my blue cottage.
The picture belongs to Osma.
The book belongs to Glinda the Good.
The pan belongs to me.
Scraps was so angry her shiny eyes were sparkling.
I haven't been so angry since I chased the Wicked Witch of the West, shouted Dorothy, and she's gone.
I'm not angry.
You're not furious?
You're not fuming?
You're not feisty?
I knew the pan made the most delicious cookies in all the land, but I didn't know it could do all the things young Ugu discovered. He might be an amazing magician inside his heart.
He could be sensational.
He could be spectacular.
He could be stupefied.
We should go back to the kitchen and find out all the magic that the pan can do, said Cake.
Ugu packed his things and headed off on an adventure of a lifetime.
After Dorothy successfully defeated the Wicked Witch of the West and freed all of her enslaved Winkies, it was sure time for everybody to rejoice. This number, also known as A Brand New Day, was written by R&B superstar Luther Vandross. It was his only contribution to the 1975 show, and it appeared on his own album the following year. The song's themes of freedom and celebration were applicable then and much needed now. Enjoy our final dance number tonight. This is Everybody Rejoice.
Everybody look around, cause there's a reason to rejoice, you see. Everybody come out and let's commence a singing joyfully.
Everybody look up and find the hope that we've been waiting on.
Everybody be glad because our silent fear and dread is gone.
Freedom we sing, set our hearts singing so joyfully. Just look around, move to yourself to check it out. Can't you feel a brand new day? 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 Everybody be glad, cause the sun is shining just for us. Everybody wake up into the morning, into happiness. Hello world, it's like a different way of living now. Thank you world, we always knew that we'd be free somehow. In harmony, just to learn that we had liberty. It's such a change for us to live so independently. Freedom we seek, set our hearts singing so joyfully. Just look about, move to yourself to check it out. Can't you feel a brand new day? Can't you feel a brand new day? Everybody be glad, cause the sun is shining just for us. Everybody wake up to the morning into happiness. Hello world, it's like a different way of living now. Thank you world, we always knew that we'd be free somehow. In harmony, just to learn that we had liberty. It's such a change for us to live so independently. Freedom we seek, set our hearts singing so joyfully. Just look about, move to yourself to check it out. Can't you feel a brand new day? 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 Can't you feel a brand new day?
By the end of the musical Wicked, Glinda and Elphaba have gone down very different paths in their life. And even though they end in different places than they began, they are still grateful to have had each other. They have learned, struggled, and grown together. We want to close our evening with a message of hope from our graduating seniors. Everything they have experienced as Porter players over the past 4 years has brought them to this very moment. Let us celebrate their journey of ups and downs as they remind us that no one is alone. Together, we have all been changed for good.
I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something they must learn, and we are led to those who help us most to grow if we let them, and we help them in return. Well, I don't know if I believe that's true, but I know I'm who I am today because I knew you. Like a comet pulled from orbit as it passes the sun,
like a stream that meets a boulder halfway through the wood. Who can say that I've been changed for the better? Because I knew you. I have been changed for good.
It well may be that we will never meet again in this lifetime. So let me say before you put so much of me is made of what I learned from you. You'll be with me.
You'll be with me like a handprint on my heart. And now whatever way our stories end, I know you have rewritten mine by being my friend. Like a ship blown from its mooring by a wind off the sea, like a seed dropped by a skybird in a distant wood. Who can say that I've been changed for the better?
Because I knew you.
Because I knew you, I have been changed for good.
And just to clear the air, I ask forgiveness for the things I've done you blame me for.
But then I guess we know there's blame to share, and none of it seems to matter anymore.
Wind of the sea.
Who can say if I've been changed for the better?
I do believe I have been changed for the better. And because I knew you.
Because I knew you. Because I knew you. I have